Your Business Podcast with Frank Furness.
Well, hi everybody and welcome to Sales School, and this is Frank Furness, where we're going to help you make more money by mastering sales, dominating marketing, and really being happy. In our next episodes, we're going to be taking a look at the psychology of sales, and I'm going to be joined by my really good friend Ian Halsall, where we speak about Neuro-Linguistic Programming. Right, we're now in that part of the sales cycle where we've looked at maybe where we find the clients, how we telephone, how we get in front of them. But now we're in front of them, those first 30 seconds. How do you relax yourself? How do you get the rapport going immediately with them? Now, many years ago when I started selling, I learned 3 magical words, and it was past, present, and future. And what I do when I meet somebody, I just use those 3 words. So if I meet somebody who's got a company, I'll say, this is an incredible company. The past. How did you get started? Now, I can guarantee you that person is so proud of how they've started that company, but nobody has ever bothered to ask him that question. And they'll say to me, you know what, Frank, 20 years ago, I had a car and I used to pack the beers in the back and I'd go from door to door selling it to the restaurants, and I nearly went bankrupt and life was so tough for me, but things got better, and I just sit and I listen. The next thing I speak about is present. So tell me about your present situation. How many people have you got working here? How many factories have you got? Well, we've now got 8 factories. I've got 200 people working for me. And then I ask the question that'll give me more buying signals than any other question. I say to them, so where do you see yourself in the future? And then I say, look, we're expanding. We're going to be opening another 3 factories. It doesn't matter what kind of business you're in. If I'm in recruitment, I know there's business. If I'm in software, there's going to be business. If I'm in insurance, there's going to be business. Just by asking those first 3 questions, past, present, and future, I develop incredible rapport, get them speaking about themselves, tension levels come down, and I just sit and listen. Ian, what would you say would be some of the great NLP things we can add to that?
Well, there's loads. Firstly, I'll just pick up on your question of how do you see the future. Now that the folks have listened to this program for a bit, depending on what clues they've given you, you might rephrase that to, gosh, how do you feel about the future? Or what kind of things, how are you going to be talking about the future? Or what will the future say to you? Yeah, that one works too. So you can have a lot of fun in the first few seconds of building rapport by using those visual, auditory, or kinesthetic representation systems. Before I get into rapport in the meeting, I'd like to say that the rapport, repeating the point, rapport is very dependent on the state of the salesperson. So I would go back a step and I would say that it actually probably starts 24 hours before the meeting. Because if you think about it, what affects the state of the salesperson? Well, this is obvious stuff and I apologize for it, but I see so many salespeople getting it wrong. Did you have a good night's sleep? Were you rested properly? You fed and all that sort of stuff? Very important. Secondly, did you plan the journey? Think about it for a moment. If you're a prospect and you have an appointment for 10 o'clock in the morning and the salesperson shows up 10 minutes late, said they'd be there at 10, arrived there at 10:10, what are you going to be thinking? Somewhere you're going, hold on a second, this isn't going the way that we'd hoped. Next, what's the state of the salesperson going to be like? If the person is late, they're going to be a bit jittery. They've been stuck in traffic. So the first thing is to plan plenty of extra time. And the more important the sales call is, the more you allow for time. Because if your state is off, the rapport will be hard work.
Yeah, I've got a lovely story to tell there. Some years ago, I had a client of mine who was a really good client, and he phoned me up and he said he wanted to buy some extra products, the things that I was selling at the time, and it was going to be a big sale. But he said to me, I want you to come around on Friday night at 6 o'clock. Straight away in my mind, I was thinking M25, traffic jams, and I put myself into the wrong state. Well, when I was traveling out there on Friday nights, I'm thinking to myself, I don't really enjoy working Friday nights. It's not me. I got stuck in traffic. I got there. I was in a stinking mood. I went in and I asked him for the order, and I left 10 minutes later with no order. I phoned him Saturday morning and I said, you know what? I just wasn't feeling too well. And he said, yeah, you walked in here like you were just expecting a sale. It wasn't like you. Normally you get excited, you get enthusiastic. I said, listen, can I come and see you next Tuesday? Well, I got there next Tuesday and my frame was so different. I was excited. I was enthusiastic because that's the kind of person he was. Guess what? I walked out with the sale.
Beautiful example. And the thing is, and this is really good news, some of the NLP stuff that we're talking about in this program is a little bit less easy to use. This is something that is easy to get right. You just allow extra time, think about the state you want to be in, and then go and make your sales presentation. Oh, and by the way, if you're in doubt, arrive half an hour early, because this day and age, you've got your computer in your briefcase, you've got your mobile phone. You can always use the time for something productive should you be early. And of course, you could read one of our books if you wanted to. I've got to get that in. By the way, that's a great way of altering your state. If you read a book on sales technique by anything you like, one of mine, one of Frank's, any good sales book, that will do something to your state. So if you arrive half an hour before a sales call and read about selling, that does something to your state. Next thing is if you arrive rushed or hurried, people are going to pick that up. It's going to be bad for your concentration, but unconsciously, and I come back to this thing, that in a sales process, there's conscious things going on and there's unconscious things going on. Consciously, the prospect will be going, okay, what have you got? Who are you? What products have you got? What are your prices like? But you're giving out a ton of information unconsciously. You might be jittery. You might be out of breath. If you've not had a good night's sleep, you might have bags under your eyes or goodness knows what. Now, with everything else that's going on, the prospect probably isn't consciously thinking about that, but somewhere it's going in. They're getting the message that this person isn't in control of themselves, they're not looking after themselves properly, and so unconsciously on the side of the prospect, they're going, whoa, hold on a second, how am I convinced you're going to look after me when I don't really get the impression you're not even looking after yourself at the moment, and you haven't even got the extra work of looking after my business yet? So it's very, very important to get the state. Now, once you've got the state, there's a few extra practical tips on state, by the way. Remember, if you want to change your state, the two big tips are just thinking about it, making a decision, and the other is changing physiology. I'll give you two extra practical tips now for changing your physiology so that you can change your state. One is breathing. If you breathe in and then breathe out for double the count. So if you breathe in for, say, 4, then out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Just do that 3 or 4 times. You don't need to do it too much. That will calm you down. Calm salespeople sell a lot more than jittery salespeople. If you want to get into the biology of it, it's how you stimulate your sympathetic versus your parasympathetic nervous system. If you want to go down and understand the biology, if you don't want to be bothered with all that, just breathe in and out for double the count. Whatever, in for 6, out for 12, something like that. Don't hyperventilate. Just take it easy, nice and calm. The other one is smiling. Just smiling for no reason. That forces the skin under your eyes to squidge up a little bit, and the muscles around your face too. This has actually been measured. A microscopic amount of beta endorphins to be injected into your brain via your skin muscles, because you're smiling and squidging those muscles, and beta endorphins get generated. So it's a very mild, very natural high, which feels good, even if you've got nothing to smile about. If you can manage it, a little laugh can work well, which is easier to do if you're waiting in the car than if you're waiting in the waiting room. So these things to change your physiology will increase your ability to build rapport. Now, you walk in the door, you do what we've said about the handshake, the eye contact, and the smile. That's another one. Yes, let's talk about the smile for a moment. Not everybody likes a lot of smiling. In fact, depending on which country you're selling to, I do most of my business now in Southeast Asia, smiling capital of the world. Me being a typical Brit, I don't smile that much, so I have to use my own behavioural flexibility to do a ton more smiling than I normally would. So my face muscles at the end of the day have had a bit of a workout. Russia apparently has the lowest cultural smiling value. In fact, there's a Russian saying that if somebody smiles for no particular reason, they are an idiot. Yeah, that's a cultural thing. So for those of you selling to Russians, you might not do the big grin from ear to ear when you meet somebody, because it's perceived negatively. So you've got to know who you're dealing with and what the smiling means. Golden rule is you just look at what the other person's doing. If you're not sure, smile a little bit, and that helps building the rapport. What else? Well, we've already done clothes, but by the time the presentation started, that's already a done deal. So you've got things like basic physiology. You can match Well, we're going to talk about overmatching in just 1 minute, but you can match in various areas. We've done arms, we've done legs, we've done smile, we've done eye contact, we've done voice tonality, voice speed, and pausing. There's a few more. Breathing. If you breathe at the same rate as the prospect, that will force a little bit of rapport, and it's very unconscious. Nobody can be listening to what you've got to say and pay attention to the number of in-breaths and number of out-breaths you're doing. As with most other NLP techniques, you probably won't think about this consciously all that often, but it does work, and it's always outside of conscious awareness. There is a little bit of discussion in the NLP community about eye blinks. If they blink, you blink. I did this a few times, and I met this guy who said, Ian, you're an interesting guy, we get on, but you really do blink a lot. So I'd also pass that on, even though it's in a number of NLP books, I would actually pass that on as something to, maybe not use. So that's about it as far as rapport, building rapport, and matching and mirroring.
What about remembering names, Ian? Because let me tell you a little story about something that happened to me. Many years ago, I went to go and see a very high executive at a very big company, and his name was Eustace. And you talk about programming the unconscious mind. I went and I was sitting in reception, and I said to myself, don't call him useless. What do you think I just programmed myself to do? Well, I walked in there, I shook his hand, and I said, hi, Useless, good to meet you. And then, I don't know if you've ever been in one of those situations where it's gone from bad to worse and then disastrous, but I kept calling him useless. Then I started giggling and I burst out laughing. Well, that's not the kind of thing you want to do. So are there any little tips that you can give us, maybe NLP things, on how to remember names?
Well, before I get on to how to remember names, because something that I do in Malaysia quite frequently is how you use NLP to improve your memory, and I've done that with many people, not to mention doing it on myself. So there are techniques for that.
Ian, I've been in sales all my life. I've never heard of this Cram. What is that all about?
Well, I'll give you a... Should we play a game first? I'll give you an illustration.
Right.
Now, there's one rule. For 30 seconds, you're going to do what I say.
Okay.
That was quick. Normally, when I have an audience, I've got to reassure them that I'm not going to touch them or financial discomfort or anything. It's just going to be me talking and you thinking. So, okay. Frank, do not think about a cup. Do not think about it containing coffee or milk. No, definitely don't think about it containing milk. Don't think about it being on a saucer. Don't think about whether it's a white porcelain or whether it's got any patterns. Don't think of it being white anyway. That's the main thing. And don't think about it being on a table. And don't think about the table being made of wood. That's very important. What do you find you're doing?
I've got that picture in my mind.
Yeah, that's normally the reaction. In fact, 99% of people will think of the cup, they will think of the coffee or the milk, they will think of the saucer, and I'll say, well, didn't we just have a deal, that you were going to do what I said? I said, don't think of the cup, you think of the cup. I say, don't think of the coffee, you think of the coffee. I say, don't think of the saucer, you think of the saucer. So you seem like a nice fellow. Why should you break your promise to me?
I don't know, you just conditioned me. You've put it into my mind there. As soon as you start speaking about it, I start forming the images.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happens with the brain. It's a fundamental of the human brain. We are suggestion processing things, and it's a very, very, very powerful thing in NLP. And I call it Cram because I'm dealing so much with people in Asia who don't have English as their first language. It's a real neat way of summarizing it. The full version is the mind cannot represent a negative. The mind cannot represent a negative. So I say, don't think of a cup, you think of a cup. Now, this can get kind of esoteric, Frank, so please feel free to butt in or pull me back on track. If you're going to be good at using NLP to get more sales, you've got to be good at using language better. One of the most powerful tools that's quick to use and easy to use is Cram. Because whatever you say to somebody, they'll process every part of that sentence except for one little 3-letter word. Not. N-O-T. It takes the same amount of oxygen, or if you're writing it, the same amount of ink as all kinds of other words. But it's devastatingly powerful. Let's talk about this little word not for a moment. If I pick anything in life, this is where I get a little philosophical. Human beings have been around for what? 1 million years, couple of million years, depending on your beliefs and your religion and all of that stuff. How long has language been around? Not very long. We've not been using words like not and oxygen and house that long relative to how long our brains have been around. However, many things in language exist which do not exist in nature. So in nature, I can hold an apple and say that apple exists. I could hold a puppy and I can say that puppy exists. But I can't hold a not, an N-O-T. Not does not exist in nature. Not only exists in language. Now think about that sentence. Not does not exist in nature, not only exists in language. Think about that. I got to use a word not to describe what not is to you because it only exists in language.
Right.
Now here's where it gets really interesting, is because not has a very powerful effect on what we use in processing suggestion. So if I say to you, don't think of a cup, you think of a cup. How can you use this in sales? Well, you're probably not in a position to make a buying decision today. What suggestion did they have to process?
Yeah.
Right? So you're probably not in a position to buy today. Right? So they have to think about buying today in order to not buy today.
Right.
So you've actually run their brain through that. So, for example, you might use it in terms of, well, I'm not saying that this is the best product for you now.
Right, I'm with
so
you.
You're with me now.
No, I'm with you.
Because they weren't thinking about it being the best product until you said that phrase. And they ended up thinking about it, even if it was just for a moment. And you were the best example of this with this.
Hey, his name was Eustace, actually.
And you used it on yourself. Because in NLP, this is TM Cram in action. Because you said, don't think of his name being useless. Don't think of his name being useless. Then your mouth opened, then it all happened.
Don't we see that on the golf course as well? Somebody gets up and they say, I always slice, or I'm no good at driving. They've just conditioned themselves. They then mess it up totally and they say, look, I told you so.
Absolutely. In fact, the whole world of NLP for sports is the next boom area. Ian Woosnam has gone on record using NLP. A bunch of top PGA Tour professionals have used NLP. And just TM Cran has helped them enormously, because one of my friends who does a lot of work with golfers, I've done a few myself, we just say, well, what do you want to achieve on this hole? And they'll say, I don't want to hit that bunker. I don't want to hit that tree. Say, okay, so you're programming your mind with what you don't want. Now, the human brain processes all words equally, but it doesn't process not very well. Yeah?
Okay, so what does that mean to us in sales? What do we have to do differently?
Right, you tell your brain what you do want, you don't tell it what you don't want. So if a salesperson comes to me and say, okay, if I do some coaching, which I do occasionally, if someone says, I want coaching, I say, what's the problem? And they'll say, I don't want to waste a lot of time. I don't want to lose sales. I don't want to blow deals. So what's the TM Cran process? Wasting time, losing, these kind of things. So I say, okay, so tell me what you want. And they look blankly and they say, well, I don't want to lose sales. Okay, so that's what you don't want. Tell me what you do want. And this is really important. This is the L in NLP. Language and how the language operates on the mind. The brain doesn't process negatives very well, if at all. So you've got to process everything in terms of positive language. So you say, I want to increase my sales by 20%. I want a closing ratio of 35%. I want to meet 10 people today. And of those 10, I want 3 of them and I want 3 deals. Or, since we were talking about networking earlier on this program, go to a networking event. I want to collect 20 business cards from people who can get referrals for me, even if I don't sell. So everything gets processed in terms of positive language.
Would this almost be like positive affirmations?
Yeah, well, the thing is, affirmations work to the degree that they are positive. So if somebody has an affirmation of I won't be fat or I won't be depressed, well, guess what? The brain's processing the word fat or processing the word depressed.
Right, so now we're looking at rapport. How will it help us there? And what are some of the other NLP things we can take into account for developing rapport?
Well, you asked about memory, so I just want to close that loop. This is a big one, and one of the biggest reasons that state is really important is because all memory is state dependent. I teach at a university, and one thing I love talking to the students about is exam stress. And I say to them, have you ever had an exam, or if it's a sales call, you might have even had a sales call, where you were a little bit stressed and your state was, white knuckles, a little bit jittery, and your mind just goes blank. And then 2 hours after the exam, you're having a glass of lemonade or something, and you suddenly have that 2-hour after feel where you go, oh no, I just remembered I should have said this, should have done that. And what's going on? How can it be that 1 minute you don't have a memory in your brain and the next minute you do? Well, the memory was there all the time, but it wasn't being accessed because the state was blocking it. So if you want to improve your memory, improve your state control.
That sounds great, Ian. You know, one of the things with rapport as well, if you think about it, if you're going to go and see somebody for the first time, what are some of the things that are going to be on their mind? Who is this person? Do I like them? Do I trust them? Are they coming here to rip me off? They're coming here to take me money. Do they have my interests at heart? So they've got all kinds of questions, and unless you clear that, you're not really going to move forward and develop any further rapport. Many years ago, I heard a great little story, and I don't know how true it is, but I heard that the American tobacco account was up for grabs. All of the advertising companies were trying to get this account, and there was a guy called Ben Duffy who had a small advertising company, and he said to himself, I'm up against the giants. How can I get this account? He said, well, let me put myself in the position of the person that I'm going to see and think about some of the things that might be on his mind. Who am I? Who's my company? What's in it for him? What's in it for me? He wrote out a list of 50 questions, narrowed those down to 10, then went into the meeting and said, Mr. X, in preparing for today's meeting, I put myself in your position and thought there might be some things on your mind, such as, who am I? Who's my company? What's in it for you? What's in it for me? He gave him the list of 10 questions. The executive from the American tobacco account also had 10 questions. They swapped lists. 6 were the same, and he got the account. Now, as I say, I don't know how much truth is in that, but I've been using the Ben Duffy since 1980. If I go in and see somebody, I develop rapport with them, and then I will say, you know, in preparing for today's meeting, I put myself in your position, and I thought there might be some things you might want to know, like, who am I? Who's my company? What's in it for me? What's in it for you? I then have my 60 seconds of glory where I tell him about myself, because they do want to know how credible you are. Once again, depending on the type of client. I then tell them about my company, because somewhere at the back of their mind, they're thinking, how long have you been around? How good is your company? What's in it for you? All I say is I want to take a picture of where you are right now with your business and where you want to be in the future and just see if I can help you get there. And what's in it for me? When you're buying your product or service, all I would like to be is somewhere near the top of your list of preferred providers. Does that sound okay to you? Now, Ian, how would that tie in with NLP? Does that make sense?
Yes, a lot of sense. Well, let's look at it from the point of view of NLP and rapport first of all, because by showing that list of questions to the prospect, you're doing something really important in terms of matching. Because if you're thinking about what might be useful for them, what the chances are that they've been thinking that themselves? So in the department called thinking about what to get out of the meeting, number one, you're actually producing a list. And if you're a reasonably intelligent, reasonably educated person who's got some common sense, the chances are you're going to come up with the same obvious questions as them. So as soon as you show them the list, 2 things happen. Firstly, at an unconscious level, they're going, we like this. You're reminding us of us. Secondly, in terms of reaching out to build rapport, you've obviously gone to a little bit of trouble. So you've got rapport and reciprocation kicking in at the same time. So it's a great way of going to a bit of trouble to build that bridge. And so, yes, wonderful. Good job.
Well, I really hope you enjoyed today's podcast. And remember, if you'd like to book me to speak at your next conference or do some sales training, either in person or via Zoom remotely, please drop me an email, frank@frankfurness.com. Also, please take a look at my website, frankfurness.com, and take a look at some of my courses on productivitycenter.com. Remember also to connect with me on all of the social media channels. They're all under Frank Furness, especially LinkedIn, where I'm almost up to 30,000, and every day I have some great new ideas and tips on sales, marketing, speaking, and anything that will make you money. Hey, this is Frank. See you in the next episode.